Alexander the Great. On June 10, 323 BC, 32-year-old Alexander the Great fell ill in Babylon following a night of heavy drinking. He had built an empire stretching from Greece to India without ever losing a battle, and had been drawing up plans for further campaigns when the fever took hold. Over the following 10 days, his condition worsened steadily. He developed a high temperature and progressive paralysis, his body losing function, while historical records noted something deeply unsettling. His corpse showed no signs of decomposition for 6 full days after he was declared dead. Ancient Greeks took this as confirmation of his divine status. Modern neurologists have put forward a different and considerably more disturbing interpretation. Alexander most likely contracted Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare neurological condition that paralyzes the body's muscles while leaving the mind completely undisturbed. The disease works by shutting down motor function progressively, including the muscles that control breathing and physical movement, while consciousness and sensation remain entirely intact. Ancient physicians determined death by checking for breath rather than pulse. Alexander's breathing, reduced to the shallowest possible movement by the paralysis, would have been undetectable to any doctor of the era. He was almost certainly declared dead while still fully aware of his surroundings. Unable to move, speak, or signal in any way, he would have remained conscious as preparations for his burial began around him. The man who had conquered the known world likely spent his final hours trapped inside his own body, fully alert, as those around him treated him as a corpse. George II. On October 25, 1760, 76-year-old King George II woke at Kensington Palace and followed the routine he had maintained for years. He rose at around 6 a.m., consumed his usual cup of hot chocolate, and retired alone to his water closet. His valet waited outside. Minutes passed. A loud crash came from behind the door. The valet entered and found the king lying dead on the floor. Physicians were summoned and conducted one of the most thorough royal autopsies of the 18th century. The findings were unambiguous. The physical exertion of using the toilet had caused a dramatic spike in blood pressure. An existing weakness in the wall of his aorta could not withstand the sudden pressure and ruptured. George II died almost instantly from the resulting internal hemorrhage. The ruler of Great Britain and Ireland, sovereign of a global empire that stretched across multiple continents, died straining on the toilet. He had reigned for 33 years. Qin Shi Huang. In 210 BC, 49-year-old Qin Shi Huang died while touring the eastern territories of China. He had unified the country for the first time, established the Qin dynasty, overseen construction of the Great Wall, and commissioned the Terracotta Army to stand guard over his tomb for eternity. He had also become consumed by a terror of death that drove him to pursue immortality through any available means. Court alchemists produced pills made from cinnabar, a vivid red mineral containing mercury sulfide. Qin Shi Huang consumed these regularly in the belief they would extend his life. They did the opposite. Chronic mercury poisoning gradually destroyed his brain and organs, most likely producing the paranoia and erratic behavior recorded in his final years. When he died suddenly during his eastern tour, his chief minister Li Si and the eunuch Zhao Gao faced an immediate problem. They feared that announcing his death before returning to the capital would trigger rebellion and destroy their own positions. They kept his corpse inside his enclosed carriage, maintaining the pretense that he was still alive and conducting business. Summer temperatures caused the body to decompose quickly, and the smell threatened to expose the deception. The conspirators ordered carts of rotting fish to travel directly in front of and behind the imperial carriage, using the stench of decaying seafood to conceal the smell of their emperor's decomposing body. The procession continued in this arrangement for weeks until the capital was reached. The ruler, who had sought eternal life through mercury pills, had spent his final journey as a hidden and rotting corpse masked by fish. Richard the Lionheart. On March 26, 1199, 41-year-old King Richard I of England was conducting a siege of Châlus-Chabrol, a small and poorly defended castle in France. The garrison was so undermanned that one of its defenders was reportedly a boy using a frying pan in place of a proper shield. Richard found the situation amusing and walked the castle perimeter that evening without his chainmail, apparently comfortable that the fortress posed no serious threat. A crossbow bolt fired from the wall struck him in the left shoulder near the neck. The wound was not immediately fatal but required surgical removal of the bolt. The extraction was poorly executed, causing considerable additional damage to the surrounding tissue. Infection followed rapidly and gangrene set in within days. As it became clear he was dying, Richard asked for the boy who had shot him to be brought to his bedside. When the young man appeared and Richard asked his reason, the boy replied that Richard had killed his father and brothers. Richard, acknowledging the justice in the act, pardoned him entirely and ordered him freed with a gift of 100 silver shillings. On April 6, 1199, Richard died from the gangrene infection. The moment he was gone, his commander Mercadier disregarded the king's final wishes entirely and had the boy flayed alive and hanged. William the Conqueror. In July 1087, 59-year-old William the Conqueror was leading a military campaign in France, burning the town of Mantes, when his horse shied violently, startled by the fire. The sudden movement forced the metal pommel of the saddle hard into William's abdomen with enough force to rupture his intestines internally. He survived the immediate injury but was transported to Rouen, where he spent 6 weeks in deteriorating condition before dying on September 9, 1087. What followed his death was among the most undignified endings ever recorded for a conquering king. His body was transported to Caen for burial at the Abbaye aux Hommes, a church he had founded. The corpse had been lying in summer heat for several days by the time the funeral took place and had swollen substantially from decomposition gases. When attendants attempted to place the body in the stone sarcophagus prepared for it, they discovered it was too small. The combination of William's considerable obesity and the bloating from decomposition made the fit impossible. As bishops and attendants attempted to compress the body into the coffin, his abdomen ruptured. The resulting release of gases and decomposing matter produced a smell so overwhelming that mourners gagged, vomited, and abandoned the cathedral in large numbers. The ceremony was cut short and the burial completed hastily. The man who had conquered England in 1066 was forced into his tomb in a ceremony ended by the explosion of his own rotting body. Henry I. On December 1, 1135, 67-year-old King Henry I of England died in Normandy as a direct consequence of ignoring explicit medical advice. He had been hunting in the Norman forests when he decided to hold a feast at which the centerpiece was lampreys, a jawless parasitic fish resembling an eel with a circular mouth lined with small sharp teeth. His personal physicians had forbidden him from eating lampreys, warning specifically that the rich and fatty flesh posed serious digestive risks for a man of his age. Henry disregarded them completely and consumed what chroniclers described as a surfeit of the fish. He became violently ill almost immediately after the meal. Fever, vomiting, and severe digestive distress followed and worsened over the days that came after. Within a week, Henry I was dead from the effects of the meal. The consequences of his death extended well beyond his own person. His only legitimate son had drowned years earlier in the White Ship disaster, leaving no clear male heir. The crown passed in contested circumstances to his daughter Matilda, whose claim was immediately challenged, plunging England into years of civil war known as the Anarchy. Henry I had ruled for 35 years and died because he could not resist a plate of fish his doctors had told him not to eat. Adolf Frederick. On February 12, 1771, 60-year-old King Adolf Frederick of Sweden sat down to a feast of unusual scale even by royal standards. The meal included lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, smoked herring, and champagne, all consumed in substantial quantities. Adolf Frederick was known throughout his reign less for political accomplishment than for an extraordinary appetite, particularly for sweet dishes. When the main courses were cleared, he turned to dessert. His preferred treat was semla, a Swedish pastry bun packed with almond paste and whipped cream, traditionally served in a bowl of warm milk. They are dense, rich, and filling under any circumstances. Adolf Frederick did not eat one semla, he ate 14 of them consecutively. His digestive system, already working at its limits after the preceding courses, could not process the volume and richness of what had been poured into it. His stomach and intestines ruptured under the accumulated strain. He died from what amounted to catastrophic indigestion at a single sitting. Sweden remembers him specifically as the king who ate himself to death. His death without a surviving heir triggered a succession dispute that altered the direction of Swedish royal history. Sigurd the Mighty. In 892 AD, around 40-year-old Sigurd the Mighty, Earl of Orkney, defeated his territorial rival Mael Braict, the buck-toothed, in battle and killed him. Following Viking custom, Sigurd had Mael Braict decapitated and strapped the severed head to his horse's saddle as a trophy of the victory. He rode home with the head swinging against the horse's flank. Mael Braict had earned his nickname from a prominent protruding tooth. As the horse moved, the head bounced repeatedly and the jutting tooth scraped against Sigurd's bare calf. The abrasion broke the skin and left a small wound that appeared trivial at first. Within days, the scratch had become infected. The infection spread and developed into sepsis. Sigurd fell feverish as the bacterial invasion progressed through his body. He died within days of his victory from blood poisoning transmitted by the dead man's tooth. The Viking earl who had won the battle was killed by the trophy he had taken from the man he defeated. Martin of Aragon. On May 31st, 1410, 53-year-old King Martin of Aragon was in his private chambers suffering from a severe bout of indigestion after consuming an entire roasted goose by himself at a single sitting. Martin ruled Aragon, Valencia, Sardinia, and Corsica, and had a well-documented love of food and entertainment. Lying in considerable discomfort, he sent for his court jester, a man named Bora, hoping that some amusement might ease his distress. When Bora arrived and the king asked where he had been, the jester replied that he had just come from the vineyard, where he had seen a young deer hanging upside down by its tail from a tree, apparently placed there as punishment for stealing figs. The image struck Martin as extraordinarily funny. He began laughing and could not stop. The laughter escalated until his entire body was shaking with uncontrollable convulsions of mirth. His heart, already under strain from the enormous meal and the digestive distress that followed, could not sustain the additional physical demand of the prolonged violent laughter. Martin of Aragon died from cardiac arrest while laughing, surrounded by the leftover bones of the goose he had eaten. His death without a designated successor plunged Aragon into a succession crisis that ultimately brought a member of the Castilian royal family to the throne, significantly reshaping the political structure of what would eventually become Spain. Pyrrhus of Epirus. In 272 BC, 46-year-old King Pyrrhus of Epirus was engaged in street fighting through the narrow alleys of Argos in Greece, a city he had entered with his army during a complex political dispute. Pyrrhus was among the most celebrated military commanders of the ancient world, famous for campaigns against Rome and across the Greek world, and notorious for victories so costly they spawned the phrase Pyrrhic victory. The confined streets created disordered and close-quarters combat throughout the city. Pyrrhus found himself in direct personal combat with a young enemy soldier and was clearly winning the exchange. The soldier's elderly mother was watching from the rooftop of a building above the alley. Seeing the famous king about to kill her son, she looked for anything within reach. She found a heavy terracotta roof tile and hurled it down into the street below. It struck Pyrrhus at the back of the neck with enough force to crush his cervical spine and cause immediate paralysis. He collapsed face down into the mud of the alley. A soldier who did not recognize the fallen figure beheaded him on the spot. Only afterwards did those present realize they had killed one of antiquity's most renowned commanders. Pyrrhus had survived Roman legions, war elephants, and decades of some of the most dangerous warfare of the ancient world. He was killed by a roof tile thrown by an old woman protecting her son. James II of Scotland. On August 3, 1460, 29-year-old King James II of Scotland was directing the siege of Roxburgh Castle near the English border. James was deeply interested in artillery and had acquired a large Flemish cannon known as the Lion, one of the most advanced pieces of siege equipment available at the time. His wife, Queen Mary, was present at the siege, and James was eager to demonstrate the weapon's destructive capability in front of her. He ordered the cannon prepared and positioned himself directly beside it to observe the firing at close range. The weapon had a critical flaw in the metal casting of its barrel. When the gunpowder charge ignited, rather than projecting the shot, the barrel itself exploded outward. A large fragment struck James and severed his thigh completely. Additional fragments killed several of the attendants standing nearby. James II died almost immediately from the trauma. His obsession with the cutting edge of military technology had killed him at 29, leaving a 6-year-old child as his successor. Roxburgh Castle fell to Scottish forces regardless, and the siege was completed after his death. Richard III. On August 22, 1485, 32 years old, Richard faced the invading forces of Henry Tudor in a battle that would change English history forever. King Richard III rode into the Battle of Bosworth Field knowing England's crown was on the line. Advisors reportedly urged Richard to retreat, but he refused to abandon the fight. Instead, he dismounted and continued battling on foot as enemy soldiers closed in around him. Welsh pikemen surrounded the king in brutal hand-to-hand combat. In 2012, archaeologists discovered his skeleton buried beneath a parking lot in Leicester. The remains showed multiple devastating head wounds consistent with battlefield combat. Experts determined the fatal injury was likely caused by a halberd strike driven upward through the base of the skull into the brain stem. Richard III died on the battlefield, becoming the last English king ever killed in combat. After the battle, his body was stripped, publicly displayed, and buried without royal honors. Over centuries, the location of his grave was lost to history. Then came one of the most shocking archaeological discoveries in modern Britain. Beneath an ordinary municipal parking lot, researchers uncovered the remains of the last Plantagenet king. The skeleton showed severe scoliosis, confirming long-debated historical descriptions of Richard's curved spine. DNA testing later confirmed the identity beyond doubt. In 2015, Richard III was finally reburied with royal honors at Leicester Cathedral, ending a mystery that had lasted more than 5 centuries.